Hello, and welcome to Embracing the Fight. I am Erica Lamar, your digital creator and host. And if you've been watching with me since January 2022, thank you so much for supporting Embracing the Fight. And as you know, Embracing the Fight is about normalizing the conversation surrounding physical and mental health issues and concerns. You can find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and many more. Also, if you haven't yet, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Embracing the Fight. Help me spread my message. We want to normalize that conversation surrounding physical and mental health issues and concerns. It's so important because as long as we don't have those conversations, the longer it will take for us to heal. Now that I've gotten the business out of the way, this is episode 57, When Doves Cry. I know you all see that I have a very beautiful guest on the screen. I'm going to allow her this moment, to introduce herself like everybody else that comes on here and let her tell you how she knows me, how long we've known each other, that sort of thing. All right, you see her name is Jennifer Williams. Jennifer, go ahead. Tell the people about yourself.
Hello, everybody. I am, like she said, Jennifer Williams. Well, it used to be Lamar. So if you know my last name was Lamar, you know that we are sisters. And I have known her since we were a little over 40 years. So it's been a long time. And I'm just mother of one. I have a husband. I have two stepchildren. I work for State Farm Insurance. I'm an insurance adjuster. And that's pretty much all it is to me.
And she's my big sister. I have a big sister and a big brother. I am the baby. I'm the itty bitty baby. And everybody looking at the screen, you see how black her hair is? She does not dye her hair. And I do not dye my hair. And you see what mine looks like and what hers looks like. But hey, I got more of my dad's genes, I guess, than she did, because my mom's hair stayed black until she was in her 50s almost. But that's neither here nor there. So what Jennifer and I are going to be talking about, is grief. People have varying levels of grief throughout their lives. And this is a very, very tough subject. And we're very similar because we had a little bit of a conversation, before this. Like I asked her, I said, well, when was the first time you experienced, grief? And Jennifer, can you tell me about that?
I think the first time I really experienced grief was when Aunt Corrine Moore passed away. She was what we looked at as a grandmother since our parents, like my dad's parents, passed before we were born. And then my mom's parents, we didn't see them much, but they died when we were young as well. And she kind of took that grandmother role. She loved us and nurtured us, just like a grandmother would. She was our friend. She was more than just a great aunt. She was our friend. She looked after us, in times of need and anything. And it really hurt when she passed away back in 2000.
How old were you when she passed away?
In 2003, I was 27 years old because I think my son, Ernest, he was 3 when she passed away.
So that was the first time that you experienced what grief was really like, right?
Yes.
All right. And then going forward, as a young adult, you said you were 27 when she passed away. When was the first time that you lost, a close friend, someone that really meant, a whole lot to you?
When I had a friend named, well, we both know this person, it was Jermaine Orrington. He was a really good friend. We could always talk about anything, and we were there for each other. And even when we reconnected, through Facebook, he called me one night and said, hey, I'm real sick. Can we talk? And I said, of course. And then he told me that, how bad he was feeling and he didn't feel like he was going to make it. And I said, well, don't talk like that. And he was like, well, I need you to do one request for me. And I said, what do you need? He said, I want to see all of my friends. And I did whatever I had to do, but I rounded him up.
Mm-hmm.
We went over and we saw him and we played games. We had a barbecue. It
Mm-hmm.
was fun. And after that, me and him used to go and hang out and we'd go to the Mexican restaurants and stuff. He kind of talked to Ernest and stuff and played with him and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
hung out with him. And he was just a really good friend. He was just gone too soon. He was 36
Mm-hmm.
when he passed. And it was a really sad day when
So
he passed.
So when he first started talking about, thinking about dying, that was never, a thought in either our minds because, we were pretty young, as you say, at that point.
Yeah.
So what's it like to see someone that's that close to you in age just die?
It's a tough, I wouldn't say hard, but more tough feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Because you look at when we were growing up, because we had known him since we were like 13.
Mm-hmm.
We played together, went to church together. We did a lot of things together. And you just don't see anyone at that young of an age dying,
Mm-hmm.
like that. You think that most of us will live until our 70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
But he got sick and then he just within the time he told me back in, I think it was 2011,
Mm-hmm.
that he was sick. He died in April of 13. So it was
And
pretty.
it's usually pretty hard, when you see someone our age and then you look back and you think Aunt Corrine, she was what, in her 90s, right? When
She was
she passed
actually
away.
90. She was 91. She would have been 92
Mhm.
3 days after she died. Mhm.
And even though she was 92 years old, it felt, it felt like you were still, losing a large part of you because she'd always been there. High school graduations, college graduation, the birth of your son, every move that we made, like in adulthood, she was always there. And you just because the person is old, you don't expect them to just die.
Nope.
And she was one of those folks that never took, any medication or anything like that. And she was growing things in her garden to eat. She was trying to, do things right and be healthy. And it felt like when she went to the hospital that that's what really took her away.
Yeah.
And how did that make you feel about nursing homes and hospitals from that point?
Wow. Once, I saw firsthand how she was, treated in the hospital and how they treat older people in nursing homes. This is heart wrenching because here she was, somebody that used to go and walk to the bus stop and go downtown and sit and talk to her friends, ride out to the mall, walk around the mall. She did all kinds of things well, up until her late 80s,
Mhm.
until she was about 90. So, I mean, you really just expected her to be able to keep going. And when she went to the nursing home, it's almost like they took away that part of her that was strong.
Mhm.
Like they just destroyed it. And it was hard to watch.
Yep.
It really
And
was.
the thing about her, the level of freedom she didn't have a driver's license.
You
You
didn't.
got folks that got driver's licenses that won't drive across town because of fear. She
Hmm.
showed us, a different side of what a woman could be. And you think about the time frame that she was born and all that
Hmm.
she got to see, in her lifetime. And
Yeah.
never once did you hear her complain.
Mhm.
So being able to honor her memory and grieve her, now and still think about her, that's something, that is special to me. How do you, you know, remember her? How do you, celebrate her life?
I think about a lot of times the funny stories she used to tell me, or my favorite. When Ernest was a baby, I used to take him, by there to see her.
Mhm.
And she would say, come on, baby, come here, come here. And if he was messing with something, she would say, let that baby alone.
Mhm.
Let him do what he wants to do, because he just a baby.
Yeah.
And she would sing to him. And she, she just played with him, and it kept her, young. Like when that time when some church members came over, she told Ernest, "Come on, baby, come on, come get in my lap, and Jennifer, you come sit next to me." I knew what time it was.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so that's just the type of person that she was. She loved him. She loved us.
Yep.
And I talked to her, because when y'all went out to school, so I still was here, and I would go and see her.
Mm-hmm.
And I know one time I went over, it was so funny. You know how when older people are cold, she had that little gas heater on. It was so hot that I was in there sweating. Ernest was on the floor. He wouldn't even move. He was just like, and Cookie came in there and said, "Oh Lord, it's hot in here. Girl, why you turning?" I said, "She said she was cold." And I went and turned and said, "Look at that baby. He ain't even moving. He's just laying."
Had him on rotisserie.
He was hot. That boy was he was just laying on the floor, just looking like this.
Yeah.
He wasn't doing nothing. But there's just she was cold. I wasn't gonna change the heater just because Cookie came in there fussing. I said it was fine.
Yeah.
But she turned it off, and I got her a blanket because I was like, that's just wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I just remember certain stuff. But go ahead.
So grief hits you in waves. It isn't something that, how people can come and say, "Oh, you shouldn't still be thinking about that." Here we are, 22 years, well, 21 years later, and we're still able to sit and talk about her as if we just went to her house and sat and talked with her, yesterday.
Exactly.
Is it the same way when you think about Jermaine? Does it come in waves, or is there anything that you think of that reminds you of him that sends you down memory lane?
Yeah, I mean, I just think about like when I know one time I went to see him, I was out in the mall, and he worked in Dillard's.
Mm-hmm.
And he was out there, he looked sad, and I asked him what was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "I ain't sold nothing all day."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Well, what y'all got a sale on?" And he said, "Well, I got the men's polo on sale." Well, I said, "Well, I can't wear no men's polo." But then I said, I thought about it. I said, Mark wear it. And I had just got a bonus check from where I was working at the time. So I called Mark. I said, they got a sale on polo. He said, "I ain't no money." He said, "I don't have no money." I said, "Well, it's all right. What size do you wear?" When I left out of there, he was so funny. When I left out of, this lady thought I was, and it makes so bad. The lady was watching us because she really thought that I was stealing something. I'm like, "Are you serious?"
Mm-hmm.
So when I pulled out my debit card to pay for it, it totaled up to about he made the biggest sale that day. I bought about $600 or $700 worth of clothes from Mark.
Oh wow.
It was to give him his quota. Because I asked him how much was his quota that day. That's how he was a good friend to me. That's why I said, "What's your quota for the day?" And when he told me, that's what I bought.
Okay. So let's shift gears a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about like children,
Yeah.
We had a cousin.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone feels like, and I feel like, he was gone too soon, but God doesn't make, any mistakes. He was thriving in his life. And all he was doing was sitting at a light in an Uber when a person decided to run from the police. And that person collided with my cousin, killing the Uber driver, him, and the three people in the back seat live, but we don't know, how well they're doing. How did that feel when you heard that Gemini Jr. was no longer with us?
I was crushed. I said, because he had so much potential. He was really on his way.
Mm-hmm.
He had only made part of his mark in the world. He was getting ready to propose to his girlfriend. He was getting ready to start a family. All those things that you want your children to be able to do. He was successful in his own right, and it was snatched away in the blink of an eye. And that was a sad, very sad situation.
So in that, as you know, when we're talking to our family members, especially like when you talk to his mom or to his grandma, because you know this is our cousin and our aunt. When you're talking to them, how do you notice, or how do you think that level of grief has affected them?
Oh, it's affected them tremendously. Their Christmas that year in
Hmm.
2022 when he passed
Hmm.
wasn't the same. They didn't even celebrate. I don't even think they really celebrated Christmas that year. They just decided that they got together Christmas Eve, but she wanted to be alone in
Hmm.
her thoughts.
Yep.
And I can respect that.
And you can understand, you know, what that's like, even though, you know, you've never lost a child, you have a child and you couldn't fathom what it would be like to see him go out the door and never come back.
And then come back. Yep.
So when you think about that, though, you do have a child, and
Mhm.
your child just recently lost his father. When did
Correct.
his father pass away?
Ernest died on September 18th, 2023.
Okay.
It was 6 days after his 46th birthday.
Mhm. So what was that whole ordeal like? Just imagine, you know, take us back through when you got that call from Ernest and he was telling you my dad's no longer, you know, with us. What is that like?
Well, the weirdest thing, while I was sitting at work, I was exhausted because I couldn't sleep the entire night. I tossed and turned that whole night. I only got 2 hours of sleep,
Mhm.
but I still went to work because I knew my manager was going to be there and I needed to be there for the other associates that, hadn't been there as long as I had been. And it was just the weirdest thing. Everything that could have went wrong
Mhm.
was going wrong. And then all of a sudden, something said, check your cell phone.
Mm.
And I looked down and I got a text from Ernest and he said, my dad died.
Oh wow.
And so I told him, I said, I'll be back. I gotta call my son. And I went out and he was crying so hard. And I'm just telling him it's okay. I'm sorry. You know that your dad passed away. I told him mama's on the way. She's coming to look after you. Whatever you need, I'm gonna be here for you.
Mhm.
Because that's what I'm supposed to do. And
Right.
I told her, it's okay. I know it's tough because you loved your dad and he loved you, but I'm gonna be here for you. And I went right in, sat back down at my desk. I told my coworkers what happened. They were like, "Well, you're going to your son." I said, "I'm typing a message to the manager that was in charge then." I told her I needed to leave
Mhm.
because my son's father had passed away, and they let me leave. And I got to Macon, and he was in the bed. He looked drained. He looked really just completely out of it.
Mhm.
And I just talked to him. I said, "Well, whatever, do you want me to go with you?
Mhm.
When you go to Hinesville to talk about his service and planning everything, do you want me to help you? What do you need?"
Mhm.
He said, "I want you to come with me, and if I and just be there in case I need you." And that's exactly what I did.
And so as a mother, you know, even though you've never had to help plan, you know, anyone's funeral, you had an idea, you know, of what your son, you know, needed the most when,
Mhm.
you know, he lost his father. So how difficult was it, you know, truly being there with him in the presence of so many other people?
The interesting thing was that my ex-husband's family, they have a different family culture,
Mhm.
what what we have.
Okay.
And they since I divorced their son, I wasn't considered family.
Mhm.
So I was considered his mother, but they went in and they talked alone, and then they came out and he said he told me everything
Mhm.
that they talked about back there. They basically pushed him to the side and really didn't ask him what he wanted. They just kind of, set everything up the way that they wanted it.
Mhm.
There wasn't really too much input from him other than, how do you want to dress him, stuff like that. I don't think they asked him a whole lot. And I knew more about his dad than he did because, we were married at one point and we dated at least 2 years before we married.
Mhm.
And, I still remembered things about him, things he liked and things he didn't like. And, but ultimately in the end, Ernest ended up having to take care of everything. And
Mhm.
I helped him in the process of that.
So in that instance, you had layers of grief in a sense, because you were grieving because your child, was grieving. Any
Exactly.
parent that has a child and they see their child hurt, they hurt. It doesn't necessarily mean that, you can be callous to a person or situation when you see, what your child is going through. Not saying that you would do that, but I'm saying, some folks, when they hear, oh, I divorced this person, then I don't have nothing to do with them, I don't care if they die, whatever. This
Mhm.
isn't that kind of situation. This is more like things just didn't work out. There had to be a lot of growing up to do, and you decided, okay, I'm gonna be here, for my child, regardless of what happened in the past. And in that, you
Mhm.
had a different level of grief just for your son and how he was treated. Tell me how that made you feel.
Ooh, you ever heard the term mama bear? I turned into a mama bear because that I kind of, I was a mama bear, but then I kind of had to step back
Mhm.
and let Ernest see how he fit into their family dynamic.
Mhm.
And he saw,
Okay.
and now he knows.
And see, just in general, when something like that happens, it's traumatic, for people, and you start to see, what people are really made of, when
Mhm.
they go through grief or a traumatic experience or something like that. So let's step back and let's talk about Gemini's family in a
Mhm.
sense, because Gemini was like the bright light, and he was always smiling, never, said a negative word. You could tell, by all the folks who attended his funeral, all the
Mhm.
wonderful things that they had to say about him and how many people, were in attendance. And when you looked at that video, on the screen, you could see that he was
Mhm.
living life. He had a life well lived. But
Yeah.
then you notice that once a person is pulled, out of life, that it affects people differently when it comes to grief. People will
Mhm.
start saying, oh, I want this because I think I should have this, or um, my name should be here, and I should do this and I should do that, when it's not, even all about that. So, what was it like watching Daphne go through all of that?
It was tough. I mean, because I'm a mom, and I felt her pain in the sense that one, that was her only boy,
Mhm.
and she said that the day before he passed, for some reason, she just held on to him a little tighter than normal.
Mhm.
She just kind of hugged him longer, you know.
Yeah.
But one thing he did know before he left here, he knew he was loved by his mother,
Yep.
and that he loved her
Mhm.
too. She knew it. So there were no regrets there.
Yeah.
But she just felt like he had so much more to offer the world.
Yeah.
And now he's gone.
But I think it does her heart well, because she started like a scholarship fund, and then she was
Yeah.
giving some of his, personal effects, some of his things away, because she knew, that he would never use them, but someone else would get a greater use out of it. And for her, he continued to live on in that way. So let's flip back to Ernest Jr. What mark do you think that he's left on this world that people will remember, him for the most?
Honestly, I think that the town that he worked in,
Mhm.
he showed them a new side of him that needed to be shown. He redeemed himself and he tried to, you know, make himself better. He did. He had started, from what we were told, what Ernest was told, he had started trying to take classes again to, better himself, to get a better job. He was friendly with the town. Most of the town, the people that worked for the city were at his funeral.
Mhm.
And, he just tried to do better. He even tried to make the relationship with his son better.
Mhm.
He did. He did. He really tried all of that.
Okay.
He did everything. Go ahead.
So when it comes, to grief, we've looked at it from varying standpoints. But do you ever have a moment when you start thinking about someone that you love and you imagine, what it would be like to not have them there? Do you ever have those moments?
I've thought about it, but I don't really like to dwell on it because you don't want to, think too hard on that because you want them to be here as long, as humanly possible, especially your own children. You want to be here, them to be here once you're gone. You don't want it to be the other way around. So I try not to think, too much about that. But the life, one thing, life has a funny way of things happening, with all the things going on in the world. It's hard not to think about it, but I just try my best not to.
I understand that because I know, we used to joke around when we were little. If somebody asked about somebody, and then the next day, I can't remember who it was. I don't know if it was Whitney Houston. It was some famous person, and mommy had asked about it, and we was like,
I
"Oh,
know.
you killed so and so."
I remember who it was because remember the funny thing was, and it wasn't funny, but you remember when Bernie Mac died in 2008. I think it
Mhm.
was 2008, y'all. I think it was August the 9th, 2008. And
Mhm.
Isaac Hayes got online talking about how Bernie Mac was so funny and everything like that.
Mhm.
And then the next day, Isaac Hayes died
Mhm.
right after Bernie Mac because she asked about it. What's going on with Isaac Hayes? The next day, he was gone.
Yep. And we
And,
told her, "Don't ask about us."
because it was like, Bernie Mac was gone, and then Isaac Hayes went right behind him. I'm like,
Yep.
good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, that's why I say you ask about a lot of people because she'll say something like, "Wow, I thought that person was already dead." No, don't do that.
And then the next day.
And then the next day, or either I tell them that somebody had passed, like Carl Weathers.
Mhm.
That was he was 76, so he was right in there with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And boy, he did a lot.
Yeah.
But I remember Rocky
Mhm.
was my favorite movies.
So when you think about grief in general, what would you tell someone that they need to do to help prepare themselves, for say helping someone else get through grief?
Well, I can say truly say there's no preparation
Hmm.
for grief. It just takes a person that is empathetic, compassionate, and you have to be sincere when you're helping someone through grief because no matter what words you say, it's how you say it
Hmm.
to them that helps them to cope. Because I know a lot of it, I just talked to Ernest and said, "Well, what do you need your mama to do?
Hmm.
What do you need help with? What can I do for you? What do you need? Do you need me to go this place?" And it was some days from work I didn't get paid for. I just took a hit because I knew that he needed me. It wasn't a question of my husband was like, "Don't worry about it. We'll be okay."
Hmm.
And I just stepped into that role and tried to do the best that I could, do for him. And He calls more than he used to. I put it that way because I guess he realizes that my mama's gonna be here for me
Yeah,
regardless, and he knows it,
yeah.
and I definitely will.
And he knows now that, life is but a vapor. It lasts
Exactly.
for as long as the Lord will allow. And as sure as we are born of a woman, we all have to leave here. But
Exactly.
on the flip side of that, in order to, truly celebrate someone's life, it's how we choose to live, after that. So, what advice would you give to anyone who's watching this that's grieving right now on how to get their life back on track, get out of depression? What would you tell them to do?
It's a process. It's not something that could be done on someone else's timetable. But the starting point of trying to heal, think of the good times
Mhm.
that you had with that person. Just keep that in mind. And also, how would they feel if it was you? Or would they want you to be this way? Just think about how they would, want you to be once they passed away.
Mhm.
And just try to each day just get a little more strength. It's not something that can be rushed
Mhm.
or just disappear because grieving is a lifelong process. I know this firsthand because through my husband, because he lost his grandmother when he was 19 back in, I think it was 19. No, he was 20. He was 19. He was like 19, 20 or 21. It was back in 1990. His grandmother died first because he lived with both of them. And then 15 days later, his mother was gone.
Oh,
And
wow.
he said he never felt so alone until he realized that his mother was gone too.
Mm.
And they loved him. He truly loved both his mother and his grandmother. He did
Mhm.
everything for them that he could do.
Mhm.
And he still grieves for them now. And you
So
know how old he is. Go ahead.
that's messed up. So would you say that mental health counseling or just talking to someone, does that help?
All of those things can help, but time is the biggest thing.
Mhm.
No matter how many people you talk to, how many counselors you go to, as time goes on, it still hurts, but the hurt kind of gets less and less as you go forward, but it still hurts.
Mhm.
That pain never goes away. You
Okay.
can definitely, if you were to talk to him, he still thinks about his mom.
Absolutely. I can imagine, you've had somebody with you all your life that's loved you and nurtured you. I would hope that you never forget them, that they would
Yeah,
stay in your memory, forever. And when you have those moments when you're down, you can think of something wonderful that they did to help bring you up. And then those moments when you know that you could count on them, sometimes you feel that, twinge of pain because they're not there anymore. But you remember that you could count on them, and that gives you the strength, to go forward. So, is there anything else that you would like to share concerning grief?
grief is something that all of us will have to go through at one point or time in our lives.
Mhm.
And just give yourself time and have patience with others that are grieving. Because at some point in your life, you are going to grieve if you live long enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one thing that we didn't really discuss that I just kind of want to throw in there or sprinkle in there a little bit is people grieve jobs. They grieve the loss of friendships. And people grieve things totally differently, than others. For instance, when they had that huge layoff at Geico in Macon, you had some people that worked there 20 plus years and they're lost. They don't know, what to do. That is a form of grief because it's like their world just died and that's all that they know. And everything that they ever put into life went, into Geico, because think about it. You work 10 to 12 hours a day there. Your life is basically there. Your friends are there. Everything you know is there. And now, because either they want to, make some changes that's better for the business, you got caught up basically in a rapture, then you got to figure out how to start over. That is a form of grief. Grief isn't just losing a person, it's losing something that is a part of you that you can no longer connect with. So you hear the phrase dead and gone. A lot of folks say, oh, yeah, people die. But once you get to that point and you're sitting at home by yourself and whatever it is that you lost is gone, and you're not allowed to go back there, get it, talk to it, see it, touch it, that's a totally different feeling. So I thank you very much, Jennifer, for taking time out to be on Embracing the Fight to talk with your little sister about grief. And thank you all for taking a moment out today to watch Embracing the Fight. I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day.